So I went to the BFI Flair Film Festival, the LGBTQ one, and they usually have them sort of like their key highlighted films are the opening film and the closing film, and they have all the films in between. But the closing film this year was, I think it was the first time they had a lesbian story rather than a male gay story, like a lesbian story, interracial relationship. And so I was like, oh my god, I have to buy tickets to this. So I bought tickets to it, and it's got Shabana Azmi in it. You know, the Indian actress, Bollywood. She's really, really well known. And I came away from the film going, that was such a disappointment. Because, well, apart from my bugbears in terms of the writing quality, but in terms of actually what it was saying in terms of culture, like it stereotyped pretty much everyone in the film. And there was a particular stereotype which I really didn't like, which was about the mother of this girl who's closet gay, being this. So she came from Pakistan, the mother, and she basically doesn't leave the house, doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't ever want to speak English, and wants her daughter to get married, and spies on the neighbours, and all she cares about is her daughter getting married, and doesn't like that her daughter has short hair and an alternative lifestyle, but yet doesn't know that her daughter is gay, and all this kind of stuff. And it was trying to break out of the stereotypes on one side, but then perpetuated stereotypes on the other side. The breaking out being that her daughter is gay and that is dating a Mexican girl. And then it perpetuated specifically, so the Mexican girl was really open with her family, and it was kind of like this, oh, we're like white and super like, well, not even white, but they were white Mexicans, but they're like super open with their family and can talk about anything with their family, and this Pakistani family can't talk about anything to do with their relationships. And I thought it was a bit one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Because interestingly enough, like, I'm gay, and I've told my parents, and whilst it wasn't the best news for them, I mean, they're over it now. And whilst we don't really talk about my love life or anything with my parents, it's not like it's a taboo. It's just like any relationship, and this is what it would have been more refreshing to see on screen, is that why is something taboo sometimes? Because it's awkward. Like, it's not a white thing versus an Asian thing. It's a human being thing. You don't really want to be delving into the details of your sex life with your parents. Like, some families are lucky enough to be that, but I guarantee you that there are white British people in this country, majority of which could probably say, oh yeah, it's a bit awkward sometimes. You know, oh, do you remember the days when you were little and you used to watch a kissing scene with your parents and you were like, you know, like, everyone gets that. It's not a cultural thing as much as it is a human thing, and that's what I want to see on screen, you know. But sometimes I think it can be just time and place. I remember, did you ever watch Nina's Heavenly Delights? It's about Pratibha Parmar directed it. So it's about this Glaswegian Indian girl who has come back home because her father's just died, and so she's spending like maybe a few weeks back home, and she reconnects with an old school friend who then they fall in love and stuff. All set in Glasgow. And I remember when I watched it when I was younger, I think I was watching it when I was like 18, 19, I absolutely fell in love with the movie, and I was like, oh my god, wrote to Pratibha, I love this film, and it just connected with me emotionally. And then I've watched it again since, and I'm thinking, god, this is an awful film. I mean, I think I've become a little bit more critical in terms of actual filmmaking as I get older. But if you then just take that filmmaking critique out of my eye, which is hard for me to get out, but just connect to it purely on an emotional basis, you know, that film has touched so many people, and I just remember thinking, this is the first and most refreshing story that I've seen of A, lesbians, and B, one that's Indian, you know, and also interracial. You know, breaking that taboo of interracial, because I dated non-Asians before, and there was never any space for me to see how that worked out. I see it all the time now in sort of the YouTube world, on the internet world, where people discuss it a lot, about the ups and downs of being in an interracial relationship. Even my girlfriend, she's Bangladeshi, which although it's not interracial, but there is cultural differences. But it's nowhere near as different as actual genuine interracial, because that involves like political things as well. Yeah. And I wonder how like I remember thinking once that if you're a black man dating a white woman, you've kind of maybe balanced out the sort of privilege you have, because you've got the black man is a man and the white woman is a white person in terms of the political order. But I was like, but I wonder what it's like for a white man and a black woman, because that's like all the lack of privileges on one side, all the privilege on the other side, and how that must play out. I mean, I know how it plays out to a certain extent, because when I was at uni, I briefly dated a white guy for about 2 weeks, and it really didn't go down well. But that's a by the by.
Yeah, and you don't see so much of that in screen. I mean, The Bodyguard is also like a title,
I suppose, yeah, you've got Kevin Costner. Who's the woman?
Whitney Houston.
Of course it was Whitney Houston.
And Kevin Costner.
It's Kevin Costner,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, maybe unrealistic if you weren't a singer.
Yeah, I mean, but she may have the wealth privilege, right? And that's in that situation.
And that balances it, and he's a security guard, so it kind of balances that.
And also, she's definitely got the good looks privilege as well.
Definitely.
She's way hotter than No, and it's hard one to even talk about in a film. Like, how do you talk about it? I had this massive debate with one of my friends about how, you know how we talk about how history, especially to do with the British colonialism, is told by when you grow up, born and raised in Britain, you see it from the British point of view. And there was a recent survey saying that like 75% of people, or some alarming, don't quote me on that statistic, some alarming number of people are proud of what the British Empire achieved and did. But I think it's not that people are like, oh, it's so great that they massacred so many people around the world. It's just that they don't know about that part of it. And with the advent of the internet and more sharing of things, you know, even I only recently kind of understood the true nature, and part of my awareness came from moving to India for a few months, where, you know, there are museums dedicated to understanding the horrors of being under the British Empire. I'm even doing a play right now, basically, all about that. Lost my train of thought again. I can't remember what I was talking about. Talking about the British Empire before, because I got into an argument with my friend, and he said at the end of the day, if you tell a story, if you make a film that shows how horrible the British were, that film isn't going to do well in this country, because no one's going to want to watch it. And I said, well, it's not no one. There'll be the minorities will want to watch it. And he said, well, what about the sort of violence that it may ensue, or the anger it may ensue? And he's talking. I mean, he is talking from a place of sense, and whether I agree with it is different. But then, you know, at the end of the day, you have to remember. I think one part I do have to agree with is that, especially big movies, they have to make money. So if people don't think that they can make money, the sad fact of the matter is that then they won't get made. All this sort of cultural appropriation as well that happens in films, they use this excuse of, oh, well, my film wouldn't have been made. What is it? Ridley Scott was like, oh, my film wouldn't have got the funding if I didn't make what's his name? Batman. If I didn't make Batman the Egyptian pharaoh or whatever it was. He made a white man be an Egyptian person. And I think that's sad. They should. And I don't believe that. Part of me doesn't believe that. And the reason America is ahead of us is actually that they forced it into contracts, like equity contracts or something, say that you have to have a certain number of ethnic minorities in your production. And I think it down to the point where it must be in certain types of characters. You can't just make them all background characters. I mean, and that gave way to shows, you know, Shonda Rhimes getting so many great shows out there. And you can't say Shonda Rhimes got work purely because of the quotas that we have forced down of it. She's genuinely, independently an amazing writer, and you can't say that. And you can't say that these quotas that you're enforcing is the only reason she's done well, but it's facilitated her doing well. You know, it's allowed the United States to look and find and nurture talent within the ethnic minority industry, and they need to do that here.
Yeah.
Because part of the problem is that they don't even if you don't actively nurture that talent, then it won't come. You know, I actually sat in a drama school once, and I won't name names, but there was a director who came in and was like, oh, well, and I asked him, I was like, you know, what about this, you know, if you're going to have a play about Indians, you know, why wouldn't you employ Indians? You know, because I've seen them employ, like, this Finnish girl to play an Indian guy, a woman, sorry. And he's like, well, we at first port of call, we do try and find Indians, but sometimes you just can't find the talent. And I'm thinking, no, it's not that. There's so much more to it than that, and it's part of it is you won't find talent if you don't nurture the talent. And also, down to the point of even auditioning for drama school, you get someone, an Asian person who's not coming from a drama background, from a private school, or like, you know, your top schools who may have privately tutored them into how to audition, but maybe has raw talent, but you can't necessarily see it if they haven't even known how to prepare for this audition. They'll get thrown into the rubbish heap because from the beginning they weren't given the support to do the audition right. You know? That's how my drama school experience, it took me like falling down so many times and realising, okay, this is what I need to do, and I need to go and actually have one-to-one private tutoring. I need to invest the money to prepare for an audition if I've never trained before. Or, you know, and this was like, and again, I sometimes think, well, if I'd done it straight after school and applied, I would have had my school teachers to help me. But I was applying as an adult, where I hadn't done acting in 3-4 years.
How do you, you have an agent, don't you? So how do you find most of the roles? Do they do they get called by different productions and then get in touch with you, or do you often get called by productions first and then have to agree with them?
A mix. So I make sure I'm always in contact with as many people as I can and directly building relationships myself. So then if they want to work with me, and then once we want to start getting into a contract, I farm them over to my agent and say, you deal with the contract. But then the agent has also a bunch of networks and connections that I wouldn't be aware of, so then they would then punt me over to projects, and then if they want me.
And the roles that come in, they specify that they're looking for a British Asian actress or actor?
Yeah, so often they'll say, not necessarily British Asian, but they'll say Asian. And then they'll also either say must be able to speak Hindi or Punjabi or Gujarati, very rarely Gujarati, but mainly Hindi and Punjabi or Urdu. And then they'll come in and ask if you can, so obviously they'll check your CV. The roles I get cast for. There's I do tend to do darker plays, or to do, you know, the plays and the shows I do are always steeped in my cultural history, you know, like I'm doing a play about, a great play by the way, but I'm play about the history of Indian Revolution and sort of how the Bengalis kind of rose up and fought up against the British. And then I did a play about a Pakistani, set in Pakistan, where a young girl was raped by her local imam. I think it was imam, or local sort of like businessman or something like that, friends of the family. And that was a very dark play. And then I did a play about a girl who's run away from her family, been battered was a battered wife basically. So it's a lot to do with battered wife, raping and violence. I've not really had any opportunity to do comedies.
No rom-coms?
No. They had one opportunity last year, but because it was in the middle of a play I was doing, I really fluffed the audition because I didn't read it, the script properly enough to be ready. But that sometimes happens. You get no opportunities and then a bunch of opportunities all at the same time in the middle of like a really important play that you're doing, and then you fluff it. But that's a whole other side of my life.
Yeah, I guess it's like being freelance and creative. Things
Yeah.
often just come at once.
All
in
at
threes.
once. Exactly. So it helps to be prepared. This first year I've actually felt like really prepared. So I had like a whole month of February like doing nothing. So I was like, okay, let me learn a couple of monologues for Shakespeare, just so that if Shakespeare comes on my doorstep, I have a comic and a dramatic ready. And it actually paid off because my agent asked me to film a self-tape literally yesterday with she messaged me like 10 o'clock at night saying, can you just send me a video over of you doing these 2 monologues. Normally you can't learn 2 monologues just like that, and I had rehearsal like for 10 hours yesterday, so I managed to do it because I already knew the monologues. That helps. That really helps to be prepared beforehand. But it's interesting actually. It's for a play. Is for a production of Hamlet and Sense and Sensibility, neither of which I've ever been put forward for because it's a very white production or story. But it's interesting that they've called me in. So they're obviously doing. It's an American company though, so of course, right? Yeah. America is definitely the way forward, unfortunately, unless there's some major things done in this country, which by the looks of our politics is not going to be anytime soon, unless you do something. And the thing is, even America's not going anywhere anytime soon. So
what do you think should be done?
What should be done? I definitely do think, first of all, they need to do. I know this is so controversial, but you need to. People need to do some calculations as to the realistic and fair and right amount of multi-ethnicness that needs to be in every production, and then write them into contracts. You must have this. You must have this. People need to start seeing more and more like a range of actors and people reflected back on in the media. I watched stuff on TV, and try and keep up with it. It's still very white, unless you're watching a specifically Asian program, which at least there's more of the Asian programs, but they're still quite segregated. You have Asians watching Asian TV, and you have your white people watching the white TV. What would be really nice is if we could the Asian community and the white community could watch or have opportunity to watch things where you cross cultural things in it, because that's where actually you have social change. Right, rather than having only Asian TV and only white TV. I definitely think there needs to be minimum numbers, just because it will then galvanise the entire industry to start going, okay, well, we don't want a drop in our quality of stuff, so we better start pushing heaven and earth to make sure that these kids are supported from the young age, then go into the right schools, get the right training, and then get the right opportunities. The way we've been doing for the rest of the, for the authority culture for this time. Because now the authority culture is not just white, it's a mixture. And I guess sometimes it feels like that in London, but I forget actually outside of London, it's actually not that, outside the major cities, it's not that multicultural.